Welcome to the Latter Rain Project. In the series, The New Covenant Promise Complete, today we're studying Egypt to Canaan. Moses wrote the story of the Exodus not for our historical curiosity alone, but to educate us as to what will happen at the time of the end. Concerning ancient Israel in the wilderness, Paul tells us this, and I quote, "Now all these things happen unto them for examples, and they are written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the world are come." We are to use their experiences, that is, those of them that went through the wilderness, as a type to understand how we're living out an antitype in these last days. The antitype concerns the 21st century Christians, and especially the remnant of his people. We're headed for and should be in preparation to enter the heavenly promised land, the eternal Canaan. Is something holding us back? Like the church in the wilderness in Moses' day, the remnant church will need faith to succeed. Faith is trusting what God says He will do for us, not in what we can do for Him. Are we ready with that faith, or are we repeating the history of ancient Israel? We should be equipping ourselves with the faith needed to enter that heavenly Canaan. The children of Israel failed to obey God as they journeyed through the wilderness from Egypt to Canaan. They failed test after test. Each trial was an opportunity to show their faith in the faithful one of Israel and give glory to Him. However, they looked to self for strength and found little or none. Will the last day church have faith and pass over Jordan on time? Or will the remnant people of God repeat history and fall short of God's expectation? From God's prophet, the answer is clear, and I quote Ellen White. God would have His people in these days review with a humble heart and teachable spirit the trials through which ancient Israel passed, that they may be instructed in their preparation for the heavenly Canaan. Patriarchs and Prophets 293. She continues, "Satan's snares are laid for us as verily as they were laid for the children of Israel just prior to their entrance into the promised land, or the land of Canaan. We are repeating the history of that people." Testimonies to the Church, Volume 5, page 160. The Savior of Israel miraculously freed the people from the Egyptians by working 10 plagues. Yet in spite of those miracles, they remained mostly without faith. Instead, they were fearful as they stood on the shore of the Red Sea. Though lacking faith, God took them across anyway. Their constant murmuring showed their lack of faith, resulting in disobedience to the promise of Yahweh when He told them to move forward. Finally, as they stood on the border of the promised land, would they believe and trust God? Would faith in God's promise lead to obedience? We know they didn't have the faith, nor did they obey. On the edge of the promised land, their faith failed again. Consequently, they had to go back to the wilderness for an additional 40 years. After the 40 years, do you know why they finally went in? It wasn't because of their faith or their obedience. No, it was because the wickedness of the nations. In Deuteronomy 9, it says this, "Understand therefore this day that the Lord your God, He goes before you as a consuming fire, and he shall destroy them, and he shall bring them down before your face. So will you drive them out and destroy them quickly, as the Lord has said unto you. So God says he's going to take them in. But don't say, he says, don't say to yourself in your heart, after the Lord your God has cast them out from before you, saying, for my righteousness the Lord has brought me to possess this land. But for the wickedness of the nations, the Lord drives them out before you. It's the wickedness of the nations. And once again, I quote, not for your righteousness or for the uprightness of your heart do you go to possess their land, but for the wickedness of these nations, the Lord your God drives them out from before you, and that he may perform the word which the Lord sware unto your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So God is going to bring them through, not because they have faith, not because they have righteousness, not because they obey, but because he promised it to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and because of the wickedness in the land. Understand, therefore, it continues in Deuteronomy, understand, therefore, that the Lord your God does not give you this good land to possess it for your righteousness, for you are a stiff-necked people. Deuteronomy 9, 3-6. What's a stiff-necked person? I haven't heard a good explanation of what that is, but I'd like to venture a guess. When we're walking and God calls us and we keep walking and we don't turn to God and we just keep walking and keep our neck straight, could we be said to have a stiff-necked? Well, maybe, maybe not. Yes, it was for the wickedness in the land. The cup of iniquity for the heathen was full. Their abominable, sinful habits were more than the Lord could continue to tolerate. Let's project this same scene as an example for our time. Can we also conclude that at the time of the end of the final generation, at the second coming, entrance into the millennium will be because of the wickedness and the corrupt world? Is that why we're going to go through to the end? The same reason, because of corruption in the land. The woman in scarlet and purple has committed fornication with the kings of the earth when she presented her false doctrines. These soul-damning errors are represented by a cup of iniquity held in her hand, full of abominations. They are full. When it's full, it's full. We understand the Israelites failed because of a lack of faith. Then because they didn't believe, they didn't obey. Is it fair to say that at the end of time, the Israel of the promise will also lack faith? Will the abominations and the evil in the world more likely bring about Earth's final scenes of destruction just before Christ's second coming? Will end-time Israel fail to have faith in God's promises, as did the nation of Israel of old? Let's read about it from the Bible. In 1 Corinthians 10, verse 11, it says, now all these things happen unto them for examples, and they are written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the earth are come. I think we can expect the end to be very similar to entering Canaan land many years ago. The Israelites being freed from Egypt and moving forward. They didn't have faith. Do we have the faith? or are we going to have to go in because of the corruption in the land? We need to earnestly study the travels of the Israelites and see parallels for our day. Taylor Bunch presented this scenario in the 1930s in his book, Exodus and Advent Movement in Type and Antitype. And Morris Venden wrote about this parallelism in the 1970s. More recently, you will find it explained in the book, The Ceiling on Hold, Where Are the Watchmen? The modern-day prophet of the Lord says more. The history of the wilderness life of Israel was chronicled for the benefit of the Israel of God at the close of time. The record of God's dealing, Ellen White says, the record of God's dealing with the wandering of the desert in all their marchings to and fro, in their exposure to hunger, thirst, and weariness, and in the striking manifestation of His power for their relief is fraught with warnings and instructions for the people of all ages. Ellen White continues, the varied experience of the Hebrews was a school of preparation for their promised home in Canaan. God would have His people in these days review with a humble heart and teachable spirit the trials through which ancient Israel passed, that they may be instructed in their preparation for the heavenly Canaan. Patriarchs and Prophets 2:93. Let it be known again that faith brings obedience. Caleb and Joshua at the border of the promised land believed the promise of Jehovah, that they could go in, and they were ready to obey according to their faith. Yes, Caleb and Joshua were ready to enter because they had faith in God's promise. Since faith brings obedience, they were ready to obey. How much danger are we in that the same outcome will happen with us today? What about idolatry? Are we in any danger of practicing idolatry as those in Moses' day? Ellen White says modern Israel are in greater danger of forgetting God and being led into idolatry than were His ancient people. Many idols are worshipped even by professed Sabbath keepers. Modern Israel is the Seventh-day Adventist Church. We have quotes from Ellen White that say that. God especially charged His ancient people to guard against idolatry. For if they should be led away from serving the living God, His curse would rest upon them, while if they would love Him with all their hearts, with all their souls, and with all their might, He would abundantly bless them in basket and in store, and would remove sickness from the midst of them. Testimonies, Volume 1, page 609. Modern Israel is made up of those who are Christ's, the remnant church, the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Today the Seventh-day Adventist Church today is in worse danger than those of Moses' day. For we have more possessions, therefore more possible idols. More things to draw us away from true worship of God. We'll find few literal idols in our homes or churches, maybe a cross or some religious pictures. The idols mentioned above are things, stuff, that we care for more than we care for the Lord and the people who are perishing. Nevertheless, God won't forsake His people, not the people He loves dearly. Another quotation, a blessing or a curse is now before the people of God. A blessing if they come out from the world and be separate, and walk in the path of humble obedience, and a curse if they unite with the idolatrous who trample upon the high claims of heaven. Continuing, the sins and iniquities of rebellious Israel are recorded, and the picture presented before us as a warning that if we imitate their example of transgression and depart from God, we shall fall as surely as they did. Now all these things, she continues, now all these things, quoting the Bible, she continues, now all these things happened unto them for examples, and they are written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the world are come. Testimonies, Volume 1, 609. Where are we today? Have we been repeating the history of ancient Israel from Egypt to the land of promise? Have we failed to have faith in a promise of God? As the Israelites of old, have we had a 40-year or more delay? I have been shown, Ellen White says, that the spirit of the world is fast leveling the church. You are following the same path as did ancient Israel. There is the same falling away from your holy calling as God's peculiar people. She continues, you are having fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness. Your concord with unbelievers has provoked the Lord's displeasure. You know not the things that belong to your peace, and they are fast being hid from your eyes. She's saying that because we've turned away from truth, we're seeing less truth. They're being hid from our eyes. Your neglect to follow the light will place you in a more unfavorable position than the Jews upon whom Christ pronounced a woe. So she's saying that we're worse than they were in the time of Christ. Testimonies, Volume 5, page 75. Today, at the end of time, is it fair to say that we, the members of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, are going to enter Canaan not because we're faithful and obedient, but because of the corruption in the land and because God will make it happen in order to fulfill his promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? Are we a stiff-necked people? Are we willing to listen to what he says and obey and trust? Yes, the corruption in the world is accelerating out of control. How much worse can it get? So, have we failed as ancient Israel failed? The children of Abraham failed not only on the borders of Canaan, but before entering. They failed time and again after going in. They didn't drive out the heathen nations as instructed, but amalgamated themselves with them, accepting many of their customs and religious practices. Sadly, Israel failed to do the work God gave them. They failed in their mission to God and to the surrounding nations. Their calling wasn't realized as they failed even past the exile, continuing even to AD 70. In AD 70, they lost their city to the destructive forces of Rome. In the end, they were banished to the four corners of the earth, according to the warnings of Deuteronomy 28 and 29. The literal nation of Israel today in the Middle East doesn't have the same favored status they once cherished. They are not the children of God except by birth, and yet Israel will be triumphant. That is spiritual Israel. On page 36 to 38 of Early Writings, you can read Ellen White's comments on the sealing of the 144,000. That is spiritual Israel. She is explaining the 7th chapter of Revelation, where the 4 winds are being held by 4 angels until God's people are sealed. Here is Revelation 7. Revelation 7. And after these things I saw 4 angels standing on the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth, that the winds should not blow on the earth, nor on the sea, nor on any tree. Revelation 7:1. The next verse, and I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living God, and he cried with a loud voice to the 4 angels, to whom it was given to hurt the earth and the sea, saying, hurt not the earth, neither the sea, nor the trees, till we have sealed the servant of our God in their forehead. Revelation 7:3. And this is 7:4. And I heard the number of them which was sealed, and they were sealed 144 and 4,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel. Please notice in the following quotation from Sister White, where she gives us more information about this sealing of Revelation 7. The angel tells the 4 angels to hold the 4 winds 4 times, not once, as in the Bible in Revelation 7. Also, notice that Jesus says, my blood, 4 times. Is 4 a significant number here? I would like to suggest that holding back the sealing 4 winds 4 times is saying that there are 4 times when spiritual Israel, that is the SDA Church, has been given the chance to go into the promised land but failed to do so. And between each chance is a 40-year wait, that is a hold. Ellen White explains Revelation 7 when she says, I saw 4 angels who had a work to do on the earth and were on their way to accomplish it. Jesus was clothed with priestly garments. He gazed in pity on the remnant, then raised his hand and with a voice of deep pity cried, my blood, Father, my blood, my blood, my blood. Then another angel, Ellen White's continuing here in Early Writings, then another angel was commissioned to fly swiftly to the 4 angels and bid them hold until the servants of God were sealed with the seal of the living God in their foreheads. Early Writings 38. What else could the phrase mean, my blood? What could it mean other than the preaching of justification by faith, the shed blood of the Savior? Jesus is saying to his Father, my blood, my blood, my blood, my blood, 4 times. We won't deal with the 4 40-year periods in this presentation, but the 4 periods are discussed more completely in the book, The Sealing on Hold, Where Are the Watchmen? The responsibility of being the light to the Gentiles has been left to the final generation of Israel, the 144,000. This number is explained more fully in the book, The 144,000, Judged, Sealed, Ready for Battle. Modern Israel's responsibility to the children of the whore of Babylon is explained in the book, The Israel of Promise, the New Covenant Promise Complete. We are standing on the banks of the Jordan today, waiting to cross over into the Promised Land. Will we step forward in faith, or will we hold again? It is my prayer that we will step forward in faith as we study more completely the works of the Spirit and the blessings God has for us in these last days. May God bless you.